On Wall Street, stocks closed mixed to end the week. The Dow lost 76 points, the S&P down 3, the Nasdaq gained 5 points. Volume on the big board, 3.7 billion shares. The Dow and S&P up nearly 3% on the week, the Nasdaq up 4%. Crude oil up just over 1% to $45 a barrel. Gold and copper closing relatively flat. Silver gained nearly 1%. Wells Fargo ordered to pay nearly $600 million in a settlement with all 50 states. The bank illegally opened numerous fake accounts for customers without their discretion. And a reminder to listen to Lou's reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Well, radical Dems gearing up to challenge President Trump in 2019 any which way they can. House Dems looking to hire new staff ahead of likely investigations into the president. The House Judiciary Committee posting a job listing for lawyers with experience in constitutional and immigration law, and the House and Oversight and Government Reform Committee posting an opening for a, quote, executive branch investigative counsel. The Alabama Attorney General is investigating whether a left-wing disinformation campaign against former Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore violated campaign finance law. Left-wing operatives tried to tie Russia to Moore campaign by creating thousands of fake Russian bots that followed Moore's Twitter account. LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, a billionaire, apologized for pumping $750,000 of his own dollars into this disinformation campaign. Joining me now to talk about this and other things, Daily Caller News Foundation editor-in-chief Christopher Bedford. Christopher, great to see you. First of all, let's talk about all the lawyering up that's going on in the right place for it, Washington, D.C. There are more lawyers per capita there than any place in the world. Is it just going to be investigations from wall to wall? Is that all we're going to see in 2019?
I expect that because that's the best use of the House of Representatives' power. If Democrats don't control the U.S. Senate and they don't control the executive, their best bet is to pick at the president as much as they can and attack his nominees as much as they can and see what they can do to slow down his government. And this is something that Democrats have always been really smart about. And unfortunately for conservatives, they have not been that smart about, which is staff is your brain power, your ability to govern. Every single semester we hear about conservative congressmen returning money from their offices to the Treasury instead of hiring lawyers and hiring good staff and paying right people who can help them enact their agenda. Democrats do not do that. They hire smart people, and that allows their members to be more effective against the opposition.
Well, they swim in that water better. That's their breeding ground, if you will. I mean, that's why I remember Ted Kennedy had even the most hardened conservative. There was a conservative Republican named Gordon Humphrey from New Hampshire, a senator who admired Senator Kennedy's staff. He kept saying, "How do you do it?" I mean, it's just because that's the air that they breathe.
They do very well. They're more comfortable with it. Conservatives think that returning money to the Treasury will help,
right,
but it usually doesn't. What would help them is to have strong staffing like the Democrats, who are much better at the swamp creature politics, do.
Well, the other thing other than investigating President Trump that they could be doing is creating these new committees. And in fact, Nancy Pelosi just announced the head of one of those new committees, which will be the subcommittee to study climate crisis. It's not just climate change. Now she calls it climate crisis, because when you use the word crisis inside the Beltway, that gives you a license to take even more of our money, right?
It does, and it will, and that's exactly kind of what they're trying to do. But also what Pelosi's trying to do here is head off a challenge from the left. The new left that's coming to the Democratic Party, they want to pass a new Green Deal. They want sweeping government reforms, and they want to do what the end goal of any serious environmentalist is, which is massive government takeover of private industry. And Nancy Pelosi's trying to head that off, but also still be elected Speaker of the Democratic Caucus. So what she's doing here is she's putting together this committee to study it and to look at it, and it's not fooling the hard left at all. Ocasio-Cortez's spokesman has already released a statement saying this is like putting a screen door on a submarine. It's not going to work at all.
But they're going to take advantage of it. And what concerns me is that there's still enough rhinos left in Congress, these moderate, so-called moderate Republicans, who can be coaxed in to working with Democrats because it's for the good of mankind, you know, and that might, if there is a deal to be made, perhaps even one that's veto-proof by the president, they might just succeed in making it.
Every term, you'll see liberal Republicans putting forward some kind of new massive tax scheme or some kind of new massive regulatory scheme because they've been convinced by paranoia. Of course, there's always a bunch of conservative Republicans who push back on that, but they've gotten very, very close to doing this. They almost got George W. Bush's administration to pass a carbon tax.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Vice President Cheney's office was able to derail that for if you're against this kind of thing, but it's always on the horizon.
Let me talk now about this dirty tricks campaign that was used against Roy Moore in Alabama in the Senate race. Could have cost him the election. Reid Hoffman, who I mentioned is a billionaire, he's the co-founder of LinkedIn. He admits he paid $750,000 to an organization that then hired another organization to do the dirty work. What they did was trying to associate Roy Moore with Russians, knowing that would scare a lot of voters. And apparently it worked up to a certain extent. I'm wondering if there's concern that there are other campaigns that we don't know about yet in which the same tactic was used.
I'm always skeptical on how much impact a Facebook page or a Twitter bot has on the actual average voter, whether it's in Alabama or Massachusetts or really anywhere. I think that it's sometimes being played up, and it just shows you how much the Democrats play it up, that they would invent Russian bots to follow an Alabama Senate candidate, as if a lot of those people are really freaked out about Russians. But to your point, of course it's happening. Misinformation campaigns are in every single election, whether it's presidential, Senate, House of Representatives, and anyone who's an American businessman who's financing this should be held accountable for their hypocrisy and should be investigated to see if they actually broke the law.
Well, to Reid Hoffman's defense, he did come out and apologize, said, I made a mistake. I would never have done this if I knew where the money was going. And again, it was another organization that was hired, subcontracted by the original one that he gave money to. But the Attorney General of Alabama is investigating. Do you think he'll have any case at all?
It's hard to say at this point if he'll have any case. There are certainly people, if you're intentionally tricking voters, and you're getting into some serious territory, but it's unlikely that would be traced back to donors who may not have known unless it can be proven that they actually knew.
Yeah. Christopher Bedford. Good to see you, Christopher. Thank you very much for being here. Coming up next, a California sheriff blaming his state's sanctuary laws for the killing of a police officer.
This is a criminal illegal alien with prior criminal activity that should have been reported to ICE. We were prohibited, law enforcement was prohibited because of sanctuary laws.
We will have more on that after the break with our panel. Stay with us. We're coming right back.
New Alka-Seltzer Plus Power Max Gels. Concentrated power, 25% smaller pill. Max your cold relief with Alka-Seltzer Plus.
Oakland, California Mayor Libby Schaaf saying she has no regrets about warning illegal immigrants about an ICE raid in February. In an interview with BuzzFeed this week, Schaaf claims she did the right thing by telling Oakland residents about an upcoming immigration crackdown. Now, ICE arrested over 200 illegal immigrants in the raid, but ICE claimed 800 got away. Joining me now is Niger Innes, national spokesperson for the Congress on Racial Equality, and Fox Business contributor Rachel Campos-Duffy. Great to see you both. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Although it
Happy
is anything but for the poor family of that police officer gunned down, by the way, who was also an immigrant, but he was a legal immigrant. There was a certain irony in all this. Some people say that the people who are against illegal immigration are against all immigration. In fact, that's not at all true. This guy really worked hard to be as decent an officer and an American as he could possibly be. But Rachel, this Oakland mayor, I mean, she could have been warning the perpetrator, the murderer of this officer. I mean, it is conceivable, they're both in the same general area of California, that one of the people she could have been warning about an ICE raid was the guy who killed this cop in Northern California.
Absolutely. And in the press conference that we saw today, it was absolutely gut-wrenching. But the sheriff from Newman said that, in fact, that is true, that they are prohibited from interfacing with the federal ICE agents, and that, indeed, this was a preventable crime. And I have to wonder, the politicians can, do all these things, but the regular, everyday Californian who is sitting and watching that press conference and seeing those heart-wrenching photos of him just hours before this happened, or some say minutes before it happened, with his wife and his baby by a Christmas tree. I mean, these are real lives. You have to wonder if this law seems so silly that if maybe a lot of Californians are going to change their mind. I think actually nationally people are changing their mind. I hope
so. But the commitment, Niger, on the part of these politicians in California is so strong, and their fingerprints are all over this crime. I mean, we saw the sheriff of the county in which the crime took place really finger pointing to the proponents of sanctuary cities, and particularly to folks who tell criminals that an ICE raid is coming. I mean, it's going to be hard for them to avoid this.
That's absolutely right. Until the federal government and until the president of the United States uses his executive authority and instructs the Justice Department to start arresting some of these politicians, these sanctuary mayors, like the one in Oakland, who's a disgrace, these sanctuary governors that allow these types of criminals to just continue to recklessly commit these violent types of crimes against their own citizens, against their own population. They should arrest these folk and throw them in jail for obstructing the actions of a federal officer that is trying to execute the law. Mm-hmm. And they should do so, even if they take the risk of some crazy Ninth Circuit judge overturning it or obstructing it or stopping it or reversing it. They should go through the motion to send a powerful signal, because until they do, these sanctuary mayors and sanctuary governors are going to continue to pander to the worst elements of the far left extremists.
Rachel, there's another side to this whole thing that's taking place. You look at all of the policies of Democrats, and they do have immigration policies, but they're all for catch and release, or that is the ultimate result of their policies. I mean, you have catch and release itself. You have amnesty programs, the sanctuary city programs, allowing illegals to vote.
Right.
Some people suspect there is a broader plan, or a deeper plan, if you will, from the Democrats, and that is to bring all these people in who will be the new wave of supporters for the Democratic Party, a new base for the Democrat Party. What do you think?
It could very well be. It could very well be. It certainly looks like that. There's also a lot of economic incentives. People like to have cheap labor in their homes. People like to have cheap labor, in their businesses. So there's also a business
politicians
lobby. But Democrats
like nothing more than getting reelected. Any politician, but this may be a plan to allow that.
And when the Democrats say, "Look, we're for border security," I look and I go, how? Where? What is your plan? To me, it looks like the only people who are trying to do something about securing the border are Republicans, and they have a great leader in Donald Trump who has been really relentless in bringing attention to this. And so sad that this crime that happened, this murder, this senseless murder, is bringing the kind of attention. And by the way, great point that Mick Mulvaney brought, that you brought up. This is a very stark contrast. This is not an anti-immigrant argument to be made.
No.
This was a legal immigrant killed by an illegal immigrant who should not have been in this country.
Niger, very quickly, 2019, will this be the year that we see the end of the Mueller investigation? What do you think?
No. It is not going. I think, unfortunately, Mueller, who has a rich history, having served in our armed forces honorably, has been swept up into the political witch hunt that his investigation is. And I think that the game plan is to keep this going to impact the 2020 election, the re-election of President Trump.
I agree. I see no end to this. And I think the American people are tired of it. And by the way, not that interested. Outside of the Beltway, outside of the media, if you're in real America, I never hear, where I live, I never hear anyone talk about Russia.
There are more important things to talk about and think about. Great to see you both. Niger, great to see you. Rachel, great to see you. Happy New Year to both of you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you two both.
Thank you very much. Well, a reminder to vote in tonight's poll, by the way. Do you believe President Trump is standing tall for all Americans by threatening to close the U.S.-Mexico border if rhinos and radical Dems won't fund the wall? Cast your vote on Twitter @LouDobbs. Coming up next, the media meltdown continues over President Trump's surprise visit to see American troops serving overseas in Iraq. We'll have more on that when we continue.